Good evening and welcome to the Autumn 2024 Open Lectures, brought to you by the University of York. I'm Ellie Fiorentini and I am delighted to welcome you all to this evening's event. The lecture is part of York Disability Week, a week-long programme of events taking place within Disability History Month and supported by York Human Rights City Network. This programme coincides with the UN International Day of Persons with Disabilities on the 3rd of December, the aim of which is to promote the human rights and well-being of people who identify as disabled or as having an impairment in all spheres of society, and increases awareness of their situation in every aspect of political, social, economic and cultural life. For many of us, being diagnosed with a life-changing condition might dramatically transform our lives, but I wonder if any of us have the guts and determination to turn things around. Ian Rice was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis in his 40s and became a wheelchair user at the end of 2016. But as you're about to hear, he turned a hobby into his profession. He has some great commissions, which we're going to hear about. During the summer, he photographed the Paralympics in Paris. It has been quite a journey. Welcome, Ian Rice. What a journey.
Thank you very much, Ellie. I'm delighted to join you.
Now, we'll talk about the Paralympics in a bit, but I thought really it would be a good idea just to find out a little bit about your journey to this point. How did you know that you had MS?
Well, I was about 40. I'm 58 now. I was about 40 and I started walking oddly. And I put it down to old sports injuries from my youth and catching up with me. But it turned out to be something more than that. And I was eventually diagnosed a long time after things started, in 2013. So only about 11 years ago, I went through physios and chiropractors and all sorts for years. But yeah, it's a combination of things, but mostly primary progressive MS, and it affects my right side. So my right leg doesn't work properly, my right arm a little bit, my right hand and my fingers. My left side's okay, just right side of the body is not playing the game.
And presumably up until that point, you were quite sporty, quite active, got stuck into lots of different things when you were growing up?
When I was at school, I played cricket for my county from under 11 to under 19 every year.
Wow.
Uh, and played hockey for Somerset as well. So I've had to apologise to my schoolmasters since then that my idea of a book was How to Play Cricket by Ian Botham or something like that, rather than classical literature like Macbeth or Candide by Voltaire. So sport was my life. My father played cricket for Somerset as well before I was born. So absolutely my life.
So to have been told that you had MS, I mean, it's devastating for anybody, but for somebody who has and had been so active, that must have been such a terrible shock to you.
It was very hard to take, really. I was in my 40s, you're quite right, in my late 40s, but nevertheless, I still had ambitions to play hockey with my daughter, that sort of thing, which has been ruled out, really. We skied together when I was fit and well and she was a tiny tot, but lots of things I wanted to do were now out of the window. Particularly after getting my wheelchair, having to walk with a stick, then two sticks, and then not at all as the progression came, was really, really tough. And having to accept a wheelchair was extremely difficult and darkest time in my life, without a doubt. It took me a while to realize that it was actually my liberty.
Wow. And we'll talk about that. You talk about it being the darkest time of your life. How did you work through that? Was it the photography that you eventually saw was going to be your savior, really?
Exactly. And Saviour is exactly the mot juste. Whilst I had the support of family and doctors and so on, photography absolutely saved my life. From getting off the sofa, out of the house, to go and take photographs of something. I was living in Bristol, my home city, so took photographs from a local rugby club and a local wildlife park, a walk around safari park or roll around safari park in my case, and that really helped. Uh, this was end of 2017, just before and just after Christmas. Uh, and particularly with the rugby club, they were great fun. I would photograph the first 15 or second 15, be paid in cider, and it gave rise to my very first published photo. An extremely lucky picture that was picked up and published by Rugby World magazine. And that kind of let everything loose, really, and started off a lot more things from there onwards.
A very, very special moment. And I love the idea that you were paid in cider. So
So
I
did
won't
I at the
ask
time.
I won't ask you any of those questions because what goes on tour stays on tour. And there are the rules of the rugby club, which I know too well from my own experiences. How did you get into photography in the first place? Because it wasn't something that, suddenly happened.
No, it wasn't. You're quite right. It was 2005. I worked in corporate finance with a bank in London with an office in Hong Kong and Shanghai. It was my first trip to China, and I was fitting well in 2005. So walking along the Great Wall of China, walking around the Forbidden City in Beijing with a BlackBerry. If you can remember, if you had a BlackBerry, Ellie,
Oh,
uh,
yes.
19, 20 years ago, they were a terrible camera 20 years ago, let alone today's standards. But that was the first time, really, taking a lucky picture of the Great Wall of China in what I now know as golden hour when the light was going down. Um, and then when I left banking and started my own company in energy, in renewable energy, living in Nice, the sunniest city in Europe, and watching the sunsets every night, I thought, okay, well, let's get a half decent camera and photograph the sunsets over the Bay of Angels. And that was it, really. I started to get a little more interested in what I was doing, but it was mostly coming back to the UK, being ill, and going to talk to the cheetahs at a wildlife park instead of business partner and various other people. The cheetahs were much more elegant, less aggressive, and just beautiful, beautiful company. So that was the most important part, really, going to talk to wildlife.
So you've got wildlife, you've got
Yep.
photography, and then you've got this wheelchair that instead of
Yes.
becoming a hindrance, I forget how you described it, but gave you back your
Well,
freedom in a strange way.
it absolutely. I had no qualms in ringing someone up. Can I come and photograph with you? So I did some work with Bristol Rugby's Community Foundation, which is an amazing organisation for, and the Premiership clubs all have them, working with children and adults with disabilities, disadvantages, some severe problems, some many worse than me. So I photographed with them and also with the first 15 in the Premiership and European Cup. So that was great, wonderful, loved it, loved rugby. And having been a Gloucestershire man in my cricketing days, photographing with Gloucestershire as well. So that was really good fun. But I contacted the Olympic Association, the British Olympic Office, early in 2018 and asked, can I please come and photograph the kitting out at Adidas in Stockport? And they said, absolutely, Ian, come along. So for 2 days, I went to Adidas HQ for the kitting out of the athletes before the Winter Olympics. With one camera, I think two lenses. I didn't own a flash or anything like that in those days. The most basic of stuff in a bag, and had a wonderful time. And a couple of weeks later, I was invited to photograph with the Winter Paralympic team for a day, and they're kitting out, and that changed my life forever. Ellie, that was a real epiphany. That was something very special indeed, and it made me just appreciate that having a wheelchair and my problems were minuscule compared with others. I photographed a lovely young lady who was 19 at the time, and she couldn't see me when I took her portrait. And a couple of weeks later, she won a gold, 2 silvers, and a bronze in downhill ski racing without being able to see the slope or the
Wow.
bends. I think that and the girl is adorable, slightly crazy, but that really made me realize that my disability is not that great, and there are solutions to problems.
Adapting to using a wheelchair must have been quite interesting. Was there a lot of trial and error, or were you like a top driver, you know, from day one?
Oh Lord, no, no, there still is. I still have anti-tippers or stabilizers, as my daughter calls them, on the back of my chair in case I fall over backwards. My friends can pop wheelies at the blink of an eye on their wheelchairs, but no, me, no, 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 no. I'm still a very poor driver.
So we need to watch out then when you're roundabout. How restricting was it? It was a moment. It was a moment of freedom. But at the same time, you were going from this person who was completely able-bodied, that could walk everywhere, do everything, but now suddenly you're in this wheelchair. And I often think, and I suppose it's difficult for me because I've never experienced going around in a wheelchair. I've met lots of inspiring people, like yourself, who just crack on. They just get on with it. But you must see things in a very, very different way, and have to deal with things and plan things very carefully.
You're exactly right, Ellie. I do have to plan, especially a travel day, much more carefully than many other people would. I have to look at car park spaces. I'll look on Google Earth is brilliant, and I will look on Street Views to see if a shop or a building I'm going to has a step, that sort of thing. But it has also freed up so many opportunities. Whilst I, it does get to me, of course, it gets me down occasionally. I started playing cricket again, for Gloucestershire again in my 50s in the disabled county championship. So pulled on the Gloucestershire shirt again. Who knows where that might go? I still play, but I played normal mainstream adult cricket as well, but in a wheelchair. And it amuses me that I have a runner and I can feel sitting down for 40 overs. It's kind of luxurious. It's like being
But
an
it is.
aristocrat in the good old days.
So are we
So
drinking?
the
Are we drink?
advantages.
I was going to say, are we drinking cider before we go out to play cricket? Because you know you've
Not
got somebody
anymore.
else who's running for you.
Not anymore. The good old days, maybe, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
So I've been able to do things that and leave some sort of benchmarks or mementos that I wouldn't have done had I not had a wheelchair. So I've had some very, very special moments doing this. And playing wheelchair tennis is another one of my joys as well. It's a lot more difficult than it looks on TV, but it is great, great fun, and I play with a great bunch. So it also gives slight advantages in other ways too, in that if I'm photographing an international sports match or something like that, other photographers around me will have a plastic bench or a wooden bench or plastic stools to sit on for hours on end, whereas I have an air-filled sculpted cushion underneath me, and it's lovely. Uh, when I'm working at the Royal Opera House, photographing an opera or a ballet, where do you park in Covent Garden at all? Or uh, if not, where do you park for less than £50 a day? Well, there are 5 disabled parking bays right outside the Royal Opera House. So I have a huge advantage sometimes, and I make the most of those and seize those advantages.
We haven't got time to talk about everything, but we do need to talk about the Paralympics, because that must be right up there with being a real pinnacle of your career now as a photographer. How did you get the gig to take photos at the Paralympics in Paris?
Well, Agence France-Presse published a report a couple of years ago on diversity and inclusion. Sadly, most of the media agencies and picture agencies around the world are appalling. It is sports photography, especially, is a bastion for white middle-aged males. You will not. I'm aware of 4 female sports photographers in the UK. I've only met one. It's that bad. Agence France-Presse published their report and engaged a senior editor for diversity a couple of years ago. We made contact, and I had a meeting with Stéphane Arnaud, the global chief photo editor, in Paris a couple of years ago. And he suggested, why don't you come and work for us for the Paralympics? I said, really? As a photographer, in my performing arts, working with the Royal Ballet is the pinnacle. To be a nature photographer, to be published in National Geographic is the pinnacle. So sports photography, going to an Olympics is the pinnacle. And a Paralympics, I'm much happier to have done that than an Olympics. And I was engaged a few months before the Paralympics started, and it was an extraordinary experience, really quite remarkable. I was asked to give a list of the sports and venues I wanted to cover, and the 4 other members of the team would follow on behind, including a couple of gentlemen I've been following for a long time as the great and the good of world sports photography. So it was extreme, a massive honor to be an Englishman working for Agence France-Presse on home turf in Paris. To me, it's still a shock and a thrill.
There's a lot of skill and a lot of talent there, though. I mean, congratulations, because that really is a wow moment. Which sports did you choose? Which ones did you follow?
I went to 13 sports in 11 venues over 10 days.
That sounds exhausting.
And then spent the next 2 weeks catching up on sleep. After editing and captioning the pictures, the AFP published 356 pictures of mine from the 10 days. I started with archery. Paris was amazing because of the locations they had available. So the archery was in the garden of the Invalides, the military hospital where Napoleon's tomb is. It's an incredible building. I covered wheelchair rugby, so I've played it. I covered athletics. That was special. Seeing a Brazilian guy win the 5,000 meters for blind runners in a world record time. I cannot fathom that at all. I still can't understand how that's possible. The pick of the sports for me was fencing, because it was so fast, and the triathlon. The triathlon was truly remarkable, seeing athletes in all sorts of different classifications, from single leg amputee to double arm amputees, swimming 750 meters in the river and then 20 kilometers on a bike without any arms. I still can't fathom how that's possible either. To the blind athletes, it's truly extraordinary. And the triathlon gave me so much. Having a position as well on the Pont Alexandre with the Invalides behind me and the Eiffel Tower to the right, I had some great opportunities for pictures. The dressage was special as well. The dressage gave me the most emotional moments. Swimming got me close to tears. The dressage took me over the edge. The dressage to music in the Garden of Versailles. It was absolutely extraordinary. Watching people with cerebral palsy and as severely handicapped as that, disabled as that, winning a gold medal and what it meant to them. It was humbling.
And for you, taking those shots from a wheelchair, there would be very, very different angles, wouldn't they?
Occasionally, yes. Having a wheelchair is actually quite lucky in a way, in that I'm sitting down all the time. I'm at exactly the right height. Working for Agence France-Presse as well, there was a pecking order of photographers and with the marshals at each location. So Agence France-Presse photographers were granted access to any space they wanted to be, and other photographers had to move out of the way. Those were the well-known rules of the game. So being with AFP, I had prime spots everywhere. I've learned a long time ago, go and sit next to a TV camera because they get the #1 spot. So that was a very lucky part of being with AFP.
Just so many special moments there. Just you talking about the archery. I remember watching some of the Paralympics, and I can't remember whether it was the pistol shooting or the archery, where there was a real battle with the Italians. I think there were two Italians in the final. I think it might have been the pistol shooting,
I think that
actually.
was the shooting. That was 3 hours each way out of Paris. I didn't make it to the shooting, sadly. The archery was really remarkable. There's some of the stories. I met an American lady who'd been paralyzed after an assault by an ex-partner, paralyzed from the neck down. And she found archery. Lo and behold, now she's in the Paralympics. It was the stories I heard and the things I saw were just remarkable. And again, absolutely made me, this old fellow in a wheelchair, seem really minuscule.
Were there any other photographers there that were in wheelchairs like yourself?
Not that I noticed in wheelchairs, no. I believe there was one, another English photographer, but I've never met him, and I didn't see him there. The Guardian wrote an article about 4 disabled photographers at the Paralympics, including myself, and immensely flattered about that, and 2 photographers with visual impairment. As well as the great Emilio Morinati, who is the chief photographer of Associated Press in Spain. Emilio lost a leg to a bomb in Afghanistan, but he's won 2 Pulitzer Prizes in the last 3 years, including another war back in Ukraine. So it hasn't stopped him from the highest level there is, 2 Pulitzer Prizes. I didn't really see any other photographers with disabilities. Emilio a couple of times.
Is this it for you now? This is your speciality. This is your job. You will do sports photography.
I love sports. You're absolutely right, Ellie. But I absolutely don't want to be painted with the brush of doing disability sport. In the UK, I work for England Disability Cricket as well, and that is fabulous, and I adore it. And especially when I watch the blind team playing, I still can't understand how they do that either. But I adore the ballet and opera. When I photograph with the Royal Ballet, that is really quite extraordinary. It's the most beautiful thing I've seen human performance. I'm back at Versailles in 10 days' time with the Opera Royale in Versailles. And then later in December and another one in January. So I love operas as well. So it's a mixture. I need to talk very nicely to the Paralympic Association to get my media pass for the Winter Olympics, and then work out how I'm going to get around in the snow and the ice. Paris was quite easy, but snow and ice is a bit more tricky. But we'll see.
Yes. You'll have to put something special on your wheels, won't you? I don't know. I don't know how
I
you do it.
haven't worked that out yet.
No, but I'm sure you will. Where there's a will, there's a way. It would be remiss of us not to talk a little bit about doing work with the Royal Ballet and Covent Garden. How did you get that work?
I made a phone call. I
Simple
rang the
as
head.
that.
I rang the head of press a few years ago of the Royal Opera House. I asked, can I please come and photograph an opera or a ballet? She said, yes, absolutely you can, Ian. So I went to the Royal Opera and Queen of Spades by Tchaikovsky. Not a common opera at all. A little bit dark, very dark in fact, and in Russian, so difficult to follow. And then moved over and photographed with the Royal Ballet with Swan Lake and the Nutcracker and a few other performances, but particularly Swan Lake is always my favorite. It's my very first shoot with the Royal Ballet was that ballet, and it was just spectacular. Now I'm in Versailles as well, and have been for a couple of years, and that's different, but at least as spectacular. It's incredible to watch.
That's tough, isn't it? Having to go to Versailles. I don't know how you manage that. That just
It,
must
it's
be,
my
yeah.
it, it's my sense of humor, Ellie, to be paid for something I can't afford a ticket for.
Um, your journey is inspirational, and as part of Disability Week, what would you hope that people would take away from your story at a time when we still, you gave statistics there about the number of photographers that there are that have disabilities. I mean, that's a shocking statistic, really. So what would you hope that people would take away from this and your
Well,
journey?
there are two things and two sides. I would very much like employers to stop discriminating against disabled people, or indeed anybody else, whether it's on the basis of gender, age, color, race, religion, sexuality. There is no place for it at all. It's immoral. It's illegal as well, has been for a very long time. Next year is the 50th anniversary, I think, of the Sex Discrimination Act and the 30th of the Disability Discrimination Act. But nevertheless, unfortunately, at 58 and disabled, discrimination that I find is everywhere. It's absolutely rife. So I would encourage employers to stop it. Really simple, and employ disabled people. And often disabled people have to work harder just to get to point zero. So give disabled people a try. I would also give the message to disabled people to get out and try. Whilst certain things are not in our favor, we have advantages here and there. Blue badge parking in Covent Garden. Yes, that's a great one. Or center of Paris. That's even better. It's luxurious. But seriously, I would encourage disabled people to get off the sofa, get out of the house, and go and do something. Whether that is pick up a camera, whether that's apply for jobs and do something in the employment field, or try the sports. There are so many. Sport was my life, and it still is. And there are particularly the Lawn Tennis Association has walking tennis, wheelchair tennis, learning disabilities tennis, blind tennis. The list goes on. The same with football, with cricket. There is so many things. And as I said numerous times, Ellie, my disability was tiny compared with some of the people I saw. Taking on a triathlon with no legs, it's just beggars belief, really. That's possible at that level as well. So if anything that my photos show, it's employers, this is what disabled people can do, and disabled people, this is what you can do if you want to have a go.
I think that's a great message. We've only talked about a fraction of your journey, but it really is truly inspirational. And I'm sure everybody watching this will join me in wishing you a very, very successful future. Ian Rice, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Thank you.